Welcome to the Iowa blog. This is Family Hour. Have entered the Shabbat, at least here in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, on a beautiful Friday evening, expecting a full moon to celebrate. I have it's a little bit of bad news. Our beloved Captain Kirk, who has been part of these Family Hour programs for, better part of 10 years or more. I had technical glitches getting in this evening. Kirk, whom I dearly love, is a very analog guy in a digital world, and sometimes without the assist of my longtime friend Joe, who's the technologist among us, we have some challenges in doing it. So nonetheless, we're going to go ahead with the program that we have planned, and we will do another program within the next few days that will include Kirk. The good news that I come to you this evening with is that I think that within a matter of days, we will have resolved the issue that was so troubling to me previously. I was trying to deal with the fact that these programs that I am bringing to you, my books, and so much of what I have dedicated my life to doing on behalf of Yahweh these last 23 years, was being filtered through people that I have no relationship with. I went to YouTube, and the YouTube channel, even bearing the name of the books that I have written, some 35 of them over the last 23 years, Yada Yahowah, was actually managed by someone else. And it had links to sites that had absolutely nothing to do with my work. Very frustrating to be about the process of trying to communicate this message directly to you, to come into your homes, to speak face to face, eye to eye, and to see someone try to control my message to you, and this very mission that Yahweh has established for me to you. But I received an email earlier today that says that they're going to be two separate groups, and therefore I would assume that within a matter of a week or so that they will cease using any name associated with me, any book associated with me. All of my translations and transliterations will be removed from their outreach, and that they can go and do whatever they wish to do independently and on their own, while not infringing on my message, my translations, insights, and relationship with Yahweh. And that's, for me, is just fine. There are two people that are in particular that I've worked with over the years, however, that I think are going to remain with this new group. And should they do so, that is their choice. But I do want to express my gratitude to them. One is the man that established the newer version of the Yada Yahowah website. His name is David. He has done magnificent work. I have genuinely appreciated the quality of the website, the fact that it works across all various medium, from telephones, smartphones, to tablets, to laptop computers, to televisions, and large screens on desktop computers. It has been a marvelous website with all of my books presented on the shelf as I had asked, and with many other tools, including an index that he created. I thought that David did a wonderful job. He has been a tireless servant of this mission that Yahweh has assigned to me, and I am very grateful for his contributions. I understand it that he will not be going forward with us, but he's going to do handle a very professional transition of the URLs for our website so that we can go forward, and so that I can successfully rebrand the books and sites as Yahweh has requested. Also, there's a wonderful woman that have spent some 15 years or more getting to know, who has been tireless also in her dedication and her contributions to the publication of the books that are available at Amazon and as they are presented on the sites. And as we have gone through the many corrections and improvements and the rebranding of the books over the years, her name is Jackie, has been an essential, dedicated, and steadfast contributor to my mission on behalf of Yahweh and his people. And she has made this entire process of publishing these books and bringing them to you free online possible, as well as made tremendous contributions to helping me edit them as we learn things over time. And so I want to thank them for all that they have done over the years, and understand that they have chosen to be part of a new group. And I wish them all the best. That said, there is a ringleader, and she has her inner circle that have done some rather inappropriate things as it relates to my distribution of Yahweh's message, particularly as I have moved to this form of video presentations and the Yahweh blog. And as I was concerned about how this was going to play out last night, I did what I do anytime that I'm stumped and say, I think I need some insights on this one, because I don't think the insights are written anywhere in the Torah and prophets that I can do a translation and come to understand what's going on here, because things appear to be very odd. And my concern grew out of an experience that I had yesterday that I may share with you later in today's program. And Yahweh was very clear. He had told me that he wanted me to rebrand everything we were doing under his name, Yahweh, his menorah, which we have done, as well as to reposition everything in social media, so we just start completely over, ignoring everything that has happened in the past. And we have done those very things. And so as God communicated this, I said, so what do we do about the people who are trying to intervene and filter this message through them? And in the past, Yahweh's instructions were just to ignore them. Continue to do what you need to do, which is to create quality content. And I think if you look at the programming, particularly of the last few weeks, where we have gone through Dod's song in the garden, the open letter to Israel, the presentation on the nature of the covenant, there are some rather marvelous video presentations where I get to come into your home, look you in the eye, and share what Yahweh wants you to know. It is the ultimate expression of this mission that I was called to perform on his behalf, on the behalf of his people, 23 years ago. And some of those programs, particularly the last weeks, have been exceedingly passionate. And as I was doing that, it became apparent that we needed to deal with those who were trying to filter everything through them. And I got a different message from Yahweh last night. And it was that I've already given you the answer. You need to read the Torah. My answer to you is found exactly halfway in between the message of the adulterous woman in Numbers 5, which has become such an important part of our understanding of what's going to happen in the future, and the presentation of the Adam of Parah, which is considered the sacrifice of the red heifer, and Numbers 19 to resolve the issues of Numbers 20, which is the meltdown of the waters of Meribah. Halfway between the two would be Numbers 12. And that's where Yahweh directed me last night. So I'm going to share it with you because every word of it seems to be prophetic of where we find ourselves. And I think it's important that you know what Yahweh thinks about what has transpired. I had at one time considered the possibility of educating our listeners and those who have known me over the past anywhere from 5 to 20 years by sharing how we became a house divided, with the letter that had been written to me by one of the people who was once my wife's best friend and who was once part of this program as a co-host. And also the response that I wrote to her that I never sent to her. because it would explain exactly how we got into this mess. And the only advantage of doing that is there are a lot of very good people that have been drawn in to what I'm going to call the beehive. And they would have no reason to understand. Well, they should actually, but let's go with the idea they would have no reason to understand why what they were doing was hostile and contrary to Yahweh's instructions as well as his mission. And so with that realization, I want to share with you the fact that I'm not going to present either of those two letters, at least not this evening, not unless I have to, and I don't think I ever will. And that we can simply part company. But for those that are there, this program is for you so that you know the potential consequence of being there and you understand Yahweh's position regarding it. And I'm going to share that with you as he presented it in Numbers 12. So I want to consider an episode in the life of the first of the three Zeroah, the man who Yahweh chose to liberate his people, to bring his people home, to convey his Torah guidance, and to lead back home to the promised land. Yahweh worked through Moshe to achieve the same mission he enabled through the second Zeroah, Dod, and affirmed through the final Zeroah, Yada. These men and the insider rebellions that they faced show a lot in common, and they're worth considering, especially at this time, because as I've shared with you, there was another rebellion underfoot, although I think we're going to go our separate ways, so they will have nothing to do with me. They will not communicate on any site that uses my branded logos, alliterations, transliterations, translations, books, or other graphics, or my name. Now, all three men were exemplary in their convictions, character, and courage, as well as their steadfast devotion to learning and conveying Yahweh's testimony to his people accurately, passionately, and without compromise. All three spoke for Yahweh without collaborators. And when others tried to seize for themselves the role Yahweh had specifically assigned to any of these three men, there were severe consequences. In this regard, there is an interesting passage in Bamidbar, Numbers, that not only vividly depicts Moshe's personal relationship with God and his calling and God's perceptions of him, but also presents the scheme which is being deployed by insiders now to override his testimony today. It is the very same tactic that is being deployed against me. And interestingly, it sits in the exact epicenter of the two chapters in Numbers that have become so essential to appreciating the role that Yahweh has asked me to play and how I will be sacrificed to save the surviving mortal remnant of Yisrael and prepare Yehudim and for Yahweh's return of the Messiah Dod, which is in Numbers 5 regarding the adulterous woman and Numbers 19 regarding the red heifer. So let's review it now. The issue that sparked the assault on Moshe's authority to speak alone for Yahweh was his wife, which is the very same flashpoint that is being used against me. The motivation was influence and control, filling the void in an impoverished life by trying to supersede Yahweh's chosen implement. Being Yahweh's messenger afforded Moshe the status that others desired, not knowing the responsibility and the authority that comes with it. I will begin. Miriam. Miriam means the embittered and contentious, as well as the rebellious. Miriam is the mentally and emotionally troubled and despondent, as well as the well-fed, fatling sister. I didn't make that up. That is part of the definition of Moshe. It is from Mary, bitter, fatling, and well-fed beast, and Mara, to be contentious, insubordinate, and disruptive, and an either-or proposition. and Aaron, which is defined as the desire to serve as an adversarial alternative. Aaron means alas, one alarmingly choosing to offer a troubling option. It is from aha, not so, an emphatic adversarial situation with an alarming cry, are to be otherwise and own all things pertaining to this. And they spoke, wadabar, they communicated words to control others destructively, in this case, Peel imperfect, where the object of the hostile narrative was to have Moshe suffer the consequence of on an ongoing basis. Concerning Moshe, which means one who draws out, because of and over and against the woman, the female spouse of the Cushi. Now, Cushi is typically transliterated Cushites. It's a descendant of Ham, Noah's grandson, suggesting that she would have been from either Egypt, Arabia, or Mesopotamia, who, for the benefit of the relationship, the text reads, he had selected as a wife, having accepted a Cushite. Numbers 12:1. While there's no evidence that Cush actually denotes someone's skin pigment, nor their ethnicity, much less that they are black, she was a different ethnicity than the others in the group, as is my wife, Leah, who is a Jew, different than me or them. She was snubbed, and they were justifying their power play and embittered rebellion on the fact that they did not like or relate to Moshe's wife. As a cadre of insiders beguiled by another status-sinking, now insidious woman is doing against my wife and then me, and has done it against my wife several times. In fact, this all blew up when she made egregious claims about her role being written in the Torah. And my wife said, nah, you don't save my husband on Towrah. You're not a marvelous gazelle. You're not written in the Torah. None of this is true. And she became quite incensed by that. They had their final blow up. And because it had happened 3 times, there was no way to patch it back together. And as such, if you want to attack my wife, who I love, on one of these days I will post a picture of Leah, even before she decides that she is going to serve as a co-host on this program, so that you might appreciate why I love her. Now, the picture, you'll only see the pretty Leah as opposed to the inside Leah, who has been so essential to my ability to perform this mission, who has provided research for me for, now, at least 15 years, and who has, in the last 6 years, inspired and enabled everything that I have been able to provide. And so when you are, it's kind of like Yahweh and Dode. You go after Dode, you are really going to engender Yahweh's wrath. And while wrath might be too strong a term in terms of how I responded to this last attack on my wife and slandering her to galvanize people against me, the fact of the matter is I did not take it well, and I will not take it well. I love my wife, and I do not appreciate it when people attack her and demean her. Now, while this entire story, I think, is prophetic of the challenge to my calling as Yahweh's Choder and Knacker, his Kol and Zeroah, and I think you will agree when you hear the terms that Yahweh used to describe what occurred back then. It also condemns rabbis who have usurped Yahweh's authority by way of their oral law and popes who have claimed to speak for God, making their edicts authoritative and binding. Miriam and Aaron tried the same tactic. We want to speak for God too. And they said, there is a question as to whether Yahweh has only and exclusively given the message and spoken the word through Moshe. He has not also, through us, given the word and spoken? Bamidbar, in the wilderness, Numbers 12:2. Now, this just happens to be the second aspect of what has happened because of the fact that I wouldn't pay any attention to this individual because of her most recent, this was back in October, November, attack on my wife. I decided that I would just gray rock. I am not dumb enough that I'm going to be chit-chatty with someone who has been hostile to someone I love. So I just went to radio silence. If I had to answer a question, it was one or two words. Well, it's really hard to establish yourself as important in a situation if the person who has been chosen to manage that situation won't talk to you anymore. And so this is what prompted, well, surely Craig Winn is the choder and the Nakri and the voice of Yahweh, the Bashar, and final Zeroah isn't the only one who can speak at this time for Yahweh. Surely he can communicate the word through us too. Well, we're going to find out what God thinks of that. Now, there is no question that Yahweh chooses, he inspires, and he emboldens, equips, and supports the men through whom he communicates. And the answer regarding others contributing to God's message is no. This is what has caused this current rebellion against me. And with a deeply troubled individual and an equally disturbed man whom I may share what he has to say that caused me to recognize just how bad and belligerent this has become, that they would be the alternative to me as Yada. Yahweh's Nakar, Choder, Kol, Bashar, and Zeroah, through whom Yahweh inspired 35 books filled with unique translations and transliterations, countless audio programs, and thousands of unheralded insights that the rival Beehive uses. In fact, 95%, maybe more, maybe 99% of what they know comes from the books that I have written and the insights that I have shared along the way, which is just fine until you'd think that it's appropriate to demean me and Yahweh's messenger so that you can establish your own voice. Then, well, we'll hear what Yahweh has to say about such things. Now, these ostracized interlopers would have those who have beguiled others into their rebellion believe that their message should be considered equally valuable and valid, if not superior, even when they are using the witness I revealed. They want me to stand down so they can disseminate Yah's testimony, even if I'm the one who's providing it. And while this rather odd position seems like an illogical position, is obviously invalid, there's even a bigger issue here. How should we respond when various groups claim that God has more than one authorized voice? Who is right when there is a conflict? Can a person speak for God when their intent is to censure and constrain the chosen voice of God? Well, the answer to this fundamental question, undermining the validity of, well, there's a website named Yada Yahowah and a Facebook page and presence called Torah. And the confiscation, both, by the way, transliterations that are derived from my writings, both of Torah, and Yahowah, and the confiscation of my work on other sites and channels that they have misappropriated using my name, titles, and logo. It is obvious to those who are appropriately informed and rational, we also have Yahweh's take on the issue. And for those who would advocate that there should be additional and even competing voices, a different message, or that my voice should be filtered through them, you'll notice that God does not agree. And I share this with you because there are those who have been drawn in. who, as Moshe's name suggests, would be best served if they're drawn out. Now Yahweh heard about this. Yahweh, by the way, is the proper pronunciation of Yod He Wah, our Elohah, God, as directed by his Torah teaching regarding his Haya existence and our Shalom restoration. All of these words demonstrate the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name. Yes, indeed. He and I, Yahweh, discussed it last night. And he directed me here to Bamidbar, Numbers 12. However, when Yahweh and I last discussed the matter of rebellion, his answer to me was slightly different and therefore appropriate for the moment 2 months ago. Then he told me to rebrand the books and the website with his name and the modern menorah, and then start completely over in social media, scrapping everything that had come before, and to go forth under his name and my name and his brand, eliminating all that had gone before. He said, as for the individual who wanted to establish herself independently, ignore her, which I did. And that's both good and bad, because by doing so, I never shared with those who have benefited from my instructions regarding the covenant family, Yahweh's name, his Moed Mikre, the timeline that God has laid out to us, the benefit of Dod, his beloved son, to our very existence and relationship with God, that they had no, well, at least from me, evidence that being there was counterproductive. Now, somewhere along the way, they should have said, wait a minute, she's not part of this show anymore, and she was previously. I never speak of her, and I did previously. She's got her own new group and her own website and her own Facebook channel, and yet I have never been there, never commented, never said a word. And yet they claim that they're representing, at least initially, me, and have my books and translations and transliterations and insights everywhere. You would have thought after a while that somebody would say, this is really odd, isn't it? But nonetheless, I didn't say it directly. So perhaps there were people that thought, well, it's okay to spend time here. So I simply went about Yahweh's business, and I said nothing, all while the rebellion grew to such an extent that I was mocked, deliberately thwarted by them, as they did exactly what Yahweh and I asked them not to do. Now, so that this rebellion cannot be ignored without crippling, and that's what eventually happened. I can't ignore it without crippling the mission and precluding its success on behalf of Yahweh's people. I've been called to reintroduce God's name to them, to reacquaint them with the Son of God and Messiah, Dod, and all that he has accomplished for us, and to explain the actual purpose and conditions, the timing, and the result of the Bereth covenant, the Mikre invitations to meet with God, as well as the timeline so they know when they have to respond. And quite frankly, that was becoming exceedingly difficult because of their interference. So I brought it up again last night, and that is when, as I've shared, he directed me here. This is Yahweh's answer. This is Yahweh's answer to that group. After the confiscation, particularly of the Yada Yahowah channel, as well as their fraudulent use of my collaboration with Yahweh. So before he expressed his consternation, Yahweh explained why Moshe had been chosen. And this is important. We're going to get a unique insight for God as to why he chose this individual through whom he would work. He said, so the lone individual, Ha-ish, Moshe, he answered. He was responsive. And he was embroiled in thought before making informed declarations. Anah. He is sincere, straightforward, and devoted in his investigations and answers, lacking pretense while concerned with thinking prior to responding. He is not arrogant or prideful in his reply, even though he has been mistreated and harassed. It's from Anah to answer, respond, and testify, often under duress. And he is these things significantly more than any other man who is upon the face of the earth. The same thing was true 23 years ago. There were a number of reasons that Yahweh chose Moshe to work with him to free his people from religious political oppression and then compose his Torah. Foremost among them is that he was Anah. He was responsive and thoughtful. Based upon Anah, to answer and reply, it was this man's straightforward sincerity and devotion to Yahweh that mattered. While he was initially reluctant due to his previous experience trying to help his people, he had been burned. Moshe answered the call when no one else would. It has remained this way for most of the past 2,500 years. While there are a number of traits Yahweh finds useful and appealing, the baseline is always the same. God chooses individuals who, after having walked away from politics and religion, will answer his call. And he seeks those who are straightforward and will go where his instructions lead without wavering. He needs us to remain reliant and steadfast, as were Moshe and Dod. And while they were prophets who were mightily used by Yahweh, and I am a devoted translator and writer, and now, I guess, audible voice, I strive to follow their example, which is good advice for all of us. Those who seek acclaim are often those with the largest gaping hole in their lives, which need to be filled by feeding upon others. Still, mired in their own agendas, they are useless to God. Such men and women consider their testimony and opinions to be binding as God's chosen when they are actually competitive with his agenda. I have come across them over and over again in my life. I know them quite well. It would have been interesting in this case to see Miriam and Aaron's expressions when Yahweh came down to speak to them. Instantly, without hesitation, Yahweh said to Moshe, one who draws out, to Aaron, wanting to serve as an adversarial alternative, alas, one alarmingly choosing to offer a troublesome opinion from, not so, an emphatic adversarial situation, with an alarming cry, are to be otherwise and own all things pertaining to this. And Miriam, embittered, contentious, and rebellious. Wa el Miriam, to the mentally and emotionally troubled and despondent, the well-fed, fatling sister of Moshe. From Mary, embittered, fatling, and well-fed beast, and Marah, to be contentious, insubordinate, and disruptive in an either-or proposition. He said, this is God speaking, come out. You three, to the tent of the restoring witness, to the eternal testimony of the appointed time, Moed. And the three of them proceeded to come forth. Numbers 12:4. The Oel Moed, tent of the eternal testimony and restoring witness regarding the appointed meeting times, served as Yahweh's home on earth, where he was seen shining clearly and brightly before the people during their sojourn in the wilderness. It was the place of divine revelation and of unvarnished truth. Then Yahweh descended by way of an upright pillar cloud. Upright is a vertical and cylindrical column. It's from a mod to take an enduring and upright stand. Cloud, anon, making a visible appearance as a form of condensed water vapor sufficiently dense to be translucent, but not transparent, and was present, standing at the doorway of the tent. Standing at the doorway of the tent. Evidently, no one was going to get in at this moment. He called out Aaron, wanting to serve as an adversarial alternative, and Miriam, the embittered, contentious, and rebellious. And they both came forward. Numbers 12:5. For Yahweh to appear in our presence and not incinerate us, he must diminish himself, not in the sense of becoming less than he is, but rather by setting apart a diminished manifestation of himself. All of God will not fit into the universe he created, much less the opening of a tent. And therefore, he is sometimes represented by fire and an illuminated cloud, or an individual through whom, more commonly, through, of course, the set-apart spirit. Yahweh deploys his heavenly messengers, and he uses the words he revealed through his prophets. The rabbinical notion that God is incorporeal is as erroneous as the possibility that Jesus ever existed, much less was God. The Amud, upright pillar representation, is straightforward because it establishes a connection between Yahweh's Torah explanation and Dod's fulfillment of Passover. The lamb was affixed to an upright pole, which was to open the doorway to life in the midst of God's home. And the Edon throughout the Torah is the upright pillar that establishes and secures, even enlarges, the tent of the restoring witness. Now, the testimony of this temporary tabernacle, which had been erected during their journey to the promised land, it was an oel, it was a tent, which is symbolic of sukkah, shelters, where we are afforded the opportunity to camp out with God. Now that we understand the scene. Then Yahweh said to them, it is imperative that you both choose to listen. This was Shama, that you should elect of your own free will to hear. It was written in the call imperative, and in this particular case, it was more than a choice. Yahweh said it's imperative that you choose to listen. With a sense of urgency and intensity to the tough and raw nature of my words. Well, that's quite an introduction. Whenever there is a prophet among you of Yahweh. Now, at this point, the only person that called a prophet of Yahweh that had existed would have been Abraham, and he was only a prophet in the sense that his dress rehearsal for what would occur on Pesach with his son Yishak turned out to be prophetic of what Yahweh and Dod would accomplish on Mount Moriah, exactly 40 Yobel or 2,000 years thereafter. So Yahweh is speaking of things which would happen in the future, not in the past, because there had been no prophet that had been addressed in the way that he's speaking now. So he said, whenever there, now it should be, will be a prophet among you of Yahweh, I will make known by way of communicating through visual imagery with verbal content and a supernatural revelation, ha-mira'ah, a phenomenal vision and spectacular appearance with audible expressions through sight to perceive, a compound of ma to ponder the implications of, and ra'ah, that which is observed, witnessed, and seen to him. I consistently speak in a way that delivers the result with him by way of a series of thoughts and images in a state of altered awareness, like opening the window for the passage of light. 12:6. Prophets are prophets because of what Yahweh reveals through them. His words are their only credential, which means that if a prophet's testimony differs from God's word, the pretender is lying. When someone speaks for Yahweh, it's obvious. They know it, and so do we. And that is why there is no dispute on what belongs in Yahweh's Torah, prophets, and Psalms. It is one of the many things which differentiate the Talmud, the New Testament, and the Quran from the Torah, Nabi, wa Mizmor. Now, Speaking of not telling the truth, the rabbis who authored the Masoretic text replaced Yahweh's name at the beginning of Bamidbar, Numbers 12:6, with the pronoun he, thereby drawing less attention to the speaker and his message. The to them was also omitted, and these are but two of many examples throughout the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, where the Qumran scrolls correct the Masoretic text. God continues. It has not only exists like this it does not exist, he said, like this with my associate and co-worker, Moshe. So Yahweh is not revealing insights to Moshe through visual expressions. He is not seeing the future and reporting back to us, like, for example, Yahshua did. That's what he's telling us. With regard to every aspect of the family, I have caused him to be truthful and reliable, to verify my trustworthiness through him. I continually speak with him, mouth to mouth, doing so clearly in plain sight, in visual form, and not in allegories, enigmatic sayings, or perplexing riddles that cannot be easily resolved. He observes a visual image of Yahweh. And why then? Yes, indeed. So why then were you not more respectful? Lo Yare. Were you not appropriately concerned and differential, even revering, venerating, and being a bit awestruck, showing some trepidation when speaking against my co-worker and collaborator in Moshe 12:8. Now, there has been a written legacy from some 20 prophets, but none like Moshe. He met directly with Yahweh, partnered with God to liberate the children of Israel, scribed the Torah, and then led the chosen people home. And while all of Yahweh's prophets were Aman, completely truthful, totally reliable, dependable, and verifiable, the distinction which made Moshe unique is that after scribing the first 4 books of the Torah based upon his conversations with Yahweh, he became the voice of Devarim, which is errantly rendered Deuteronomy. In this regard, the Peh el Peh, mouth-to-mouth revelation, is interesting because it suggests that rather than inspiring the Torah, so that Moshe would say, okay, this is what I'm seeing here and what I'm envisioning here. Let me convey it in words that people will appreciate. It suggests that Yahweh dictated the Torah word for word. Further, this declaration reinforces the comment Yahweh made during their first meeting when he said that he would speak through Moshe. The most intriguing aspect of this statement is the suggestion that with other prophets, Yahweh spoke chida in allegories and riddles, using parables which were somewhat obscure. Now, this may sound a bit disconcerting to those who are new to Yah's testimony, but it has to be this way. If Yahweh made it too easy, such that those unwilling to invest the time and energy to study the Word of God and act upon it, and they could enter heaven, there would be no way to screen out those who do not belong. Moreover, part of the joy of closely examining and carefully considering the Torah, prophets, and Psalms is finding and sharing the many profound insights along the way. As in life, so it is with the Word of God. We appreciate the things we have worked to accomplish or comprehend. In this regard, I have 23 years of doing so. Some 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. And that's why those 35 books sit on the shelf at YadaYah.com, conveying Yahweh's witness to us and then interpreting it so that it applies to our lives today and that his people can understand it. But a huge part of that is that Yahweh deliberately spoke in riddles. You might say, why would God do that? Why wouldn't he just be forthright all the way through? Because he doesn't want the numbskulls to misrepresent him. He wanted to make it challenging so that only those that he specifically wanted to know, when he wanted them to know, would figure it out, make the connections to comprehend, and then share it with his people at the right time. And this is the essence of our relationship. I've devoted my life for the past 23 years to composing translations based on the Dead Sea Scrolls and sharing the insights derived from them. As I look on the result, I clearly value what we have accomplished, as should everyone. They are God's gift to you. The Tamunah term means a unique appearance, a form, a representation, a visual manifestation, a similitude and likeness of Yahweh. And it comes in all forms that we discussed previously. God is sometimes represented by fire, which he really likes because it is a form of radiant energy and light. Fire transforms that which is dead and physical, limited by physicality, into something that is more akin to light and therefore vastly freer and more powerful. And as an illuminated cloud, or as an individual, as he was before Moshe at this moment. Some have seen him in heaven, although more commonly God reveals himself through the set-apart Spirit, his heavenly messengers, and the words he reveals through his prophets, which is the most direct way to come to know God. God walked in the garden with Adam. That's Bereshith 3:8. Yahweh appeared to Abraham as an individual, talking, walking, and eating with him as the covenant relationship was initiated. Bereshith 17 and 18. In a meeting that included a wrestling match with Satan, Yahweh blessed Jacob, renaming the patriarch Yisrael. Bereshith 32. God introduced himself to Moshe as a blazing fire atop Mount Choreb. Then, as it is portrayed in the previous statement, he met with Moshe for 40 days to reveal his Torah teaching, Bamidbar, Numbers 12, and Shemoth, Exodus 24. Yahweh revealed himself to Shamuel near the Ark of the Covenant in Shiloh, and Samuel 1, Samuel 3. We read, Yahweh came and stood, and he spoke to Samuel, appearing so as to be seen, revealing and disclosing himself as the word of Yahweh. And of course, Yahweh will return to fulfill Yom Kippurim in 2033, as that's presented in Korah 23 through 25, Hosea 6, and throughout Zechariah, as well as in every one of the prophets. The same response is being leveled against those who have done to me what they did to Moshe. And the righteous indignation and intense animosity of Yahweh was kindled and burned against them. And then he departed, walking away. All they had said is, surely God is not communicating only through Moshe, but through us as well. It is exactly what I have been facing. And God's response was righteous indignation and intense animosity. It was kindled and burned against them. And then he departed, walking away. So, you have your answer if you find your place in the wrong company. There is something worse than angering God, and that is causing him to walk away. Now, as punishment for suggesting that her words and her testimony were also somehow inspired by God and equally valid with regard to his Torah, Yahweh pronounced that Miriam was malignant and diseased, clearly demonstrating that no one should approach her, much less listen to what she had to say. Miriam's fate was not pretty. Listen to what God had to say. Then the cloud turned away and departed from over the tent, and behold, Miriam, the embittered, contentious, and rebellious, was panicked and plagued, confused, depressed, and discouraged, even malignant and leprous. Sarah, she was a pest in the form of an aggressive wasp, a hornet, and stinging bee, and a malevolent leper, as ice and snowflakes, cold and frozen. And Aaron, wanting to serve as the adversarial alternative, turned to face Miriam, the embittered, contentious, and rebellious. And behold, she was infectious and she was plagued. She was confused and discouraged because she was malignant and leprous, a pest in the form of an aggressive wasp and stinging bee. And Yahweh, wanting to serve as, and Aaron, wanting to serve as an adversarial alternative, begged, pleading with Moshe, please, I beg you, my Lord, I'm praying that you accept my excuse, my master. Boy, was he ever clueless. By Adonai Ane. Excuse me, sir. And you choose not to place upon us an enduring punishment for leading astray and missing the way, because we lack understanding and have become unthinking and foolish, content with pleasing ourselves while willfully resolved and determined to pursue that which we knew to be unsupported and wrong. Even though we began something we found pleasing to us, and we confidently pursued and enjoyed it without exercising good judgment in the situation, and because we missed the way and led others astray, to bear the blame and the resulting guilt. Holy mackerel. Bamidbar, in the wilderness, Numbers 12:11. He admitted it. They had been foolish. They therefore begged Moshe, please, I'm praying, won't you accept our excuse and choose not to place upon us an enduring punishment for leading astray and missing the way? Because when you lead others astray, particularly when your actions are counter to those Yahweh has chosen to communicate through, there is a consequence, and that consequence is punishment. Normally, when you just act like a dunderhead, when you don't know God, you're so foolish you become religious, when you're enamored with politics, you're just preoccupied with life, and you don't know Yahweh, you don't know his beloved son, you haven't learned from Moshe, you haven't capitalized on what Dod has accomplished for us, your soul just dissipates into nothingness. But Aaron knew that there was a punishment associated for leading people astray, which they had done and their maneuvering before they propositioned Moshe, saying, surely you're not the only one who talks for Yahweh. He talks through us too. They didn't come out with that out of the blue. They had already set the stage, luring others in, convincing them that they were right. But then he says, okay, we're stupid as a stone. We don't know anything. Even though we pretended to be smart, we're unthinking and foolish. We were just seeking to please ourselves. We were willfully resolved and determined to pursue that which we knew to be unsupportive and wrong. I'm going to give him credit. Well, Aaron was on the wrong side of almost everything. I mean, he began this whole thing when Moshe was up there receiving Yahweh's instructions and the 10 statements in stone. He was orchestrating the building of the golden calf. I mean, dude did not have his act together. When Yahweh said, what about Aaron joining you since you don't think you talk very well? He's Mr. Yakety Yak. Yeah, but his yakety yak was almost always wrong. He wanted to talk a lot. He didn't think before he spoke. But he admitted, I'm stupid. I'm wrong. You know me, I got the gift of gab, but, the marbles aren't necessarily in the right place. He admits, okay, I'm wrong. I missed the way. Well, that goes a long way. To acknowledge that you've done this out of your own self-interest, that it was foolish to do so, that your claims were unsupported, that you missed the way, that you actually deserve the guilt. Continuing to plead, he said, let not her situation be as the lifeless and dead who are plagued, like those who die and perish for a pandemic disease. This is because to reveal the way and being brought forth, he from out of his mother's compassion and the core of his message is eaten away. Yeah, wow. Prophetic. He says, okay, what we have done deserves to be lifeless or worse. And we are plagued. And if we had pursued this, many would die and perish as a result. But then God inserted words that I don't know if Aaron actually spoke or if Yahweh just said, this is what I want to convey in this prophetic witness. Because Asher, to reveal the way in being brought forth, he from out of his mother's compassion, Rakem Hu, his mother's womb and love and mercy, and the core of his message is eaten away. You understand what he's saying there? When Yahweh chooses someone, he knows them even before they're born. And not only does he know them before they're born, it is out of Yahweh's great compassion and love that he establishes people to speak for him. And if others trample him, if they come up with their own harebrained and foolish ideas that they wish to promote and they lure others in and they filter that person's message and drown it out, then the core of his message is eaten away. And that, my friends, is why I had to intervene. It was Numbers 12:12. So Moshe, now I must say, Moshe, Dod, and Yada, the three Zeroah, have many traits in common, but we're also very different individuals. But so are our situations. In Moshe's case, he was an 80-year-old man who knew that the people around him would turn on him at any moment. They were vicious. They were embittered. They were irascible. They were unreasonable. And there were 600,000 of them. That puts him in a very different situation. Now with Dod, most of the time that Dod was mistreated and he was alone. And with Dod, the man he loved, Jonathan, was killed fighting off the Philistines. And when an insurrection occurred in his case, and there were lots of people that came after him, Dod bailed. But understand, he felt that he was vulnerable, and the forces against him were quite substantial. And Dod had, when the enemy was external and trying to harass his people, he had fought valiantly and continued to fight valiantly throughout his entire life when it was to protect Israel from outside foes. But when the foe was his own son and inside, not so much. And that's largely because Dod was equal parts emotion and intellect. Now, I am not equal. I am very judgmental. I am far more cerebral than I am emotional. I've been given a mission, and I will let nothing stand in the way of accomplishing that mission. And I will not accept interference. I will run right over it. And I will do it 100% of the time. I have always done it. I will continue to do it. But you see, we're in a different situation. I'm not surrounded by hundreds of thousands of crazed lunatics. Yeah, sure, the world's got 8 billion souls. And when you go into social media, which you asked me to do, I mean, they're yapping at you and biting at you from every possible angle, but that's different. Yeah, sure, I've had thousands of death threats. Yeah, but, that's also different. I'm not surrounded by them. And so I can stay the course. And the difference, too, is timing. There would be 3,480 years after Moshe to get it right. There would be 3,000 years after Dod's first life and 2,000 years after his second life for us to get it right. Now, well, there's less than 9 years to get it right. So I cannot be like Moshe and call out to God and say, "Oh, God, would you cut him a break?" Anyway, it wouldn't make any difference anyway, and I wouldn't do it because, well, that's not how Yahweh works. But maybe Moshe didn't have enough experience with Yahweh at this point, but that's not how Yahweh works. Yahweh's really clear in the way that he responds to people. You can tell how he is going to respond to people before the situation even erupts, and there's no reason to ask him for some leniency on one situation or another, because he's totally and completely dependable. He does the right thing 100% of the time, and he's not going to change for one person versus another. Plus the fact, what Moshe didn't understand here is that Yahweh delegates everything. And so, in actuality, it was Moshe at that time who had the authorization to act, just as I do today. When Moshe called out loudly to Yahweh to say, "I am requesting that if you want to provide restoration and healing, Rapha, if you choose to cure, mend, repair, or provide recovery," was written in the call, imperative, second person, masculine, singular. So he was saying, yeah, if it's your choice, Yahweh, I'm not telling you what to do. But if you want to restore her, well, that is my pleading. Bamidbar in the wilderness, 12:13. I would never make that statement for the reasons I have already discussed. It doesn't make me cold. It's because I know Yahweh. I know he doesn't change. He's told me what he expects, how he's going to respond in virtually every situation. And he's told me that the people he selects are responsible for acting under his authority. And those who act under his authority know exactly what it is that God wants. And we do what God wants. So my decision under these circumstances would be exactly what Yahweh said, because we do what our Father wants. And we don't do it out of a sense of obligation. We don't do it out of a sense of, woe is me. He's great. I'm this nothing. And so I'm going to do as he says. I fear him. No, we do it because we love him, because we know him, because the highest calling in our life is to emulate the pattern that he has established for us. The more my life and my decisions reflect Yahweh's, the better. The more I can accomplish, the more we can achieve together. However, Yahweh said to Moshe, even if her father had shown his contempt by spitting in her face, let no one question that she has brought this on herself and should be disgraced, humiliated, and shamed on an ongoing basis. Oh. Halo kalam. Do not question that she deserves to be embarrassed and deprived, even disrespected, and have her ongoing shame thrust upon her, nifl imperfect, as a promise and sworn oath for 7 days. As a result of what she has brought upon herself, she must shut up be isolated, even incarcerated. She deserves imprisonment. Niffle, imperfect. Niffle says that you brought this on yourself. You're responsible for what God is saying. As a promise and sworn oath for 7 days, outside and apart from the encampment. Afterwards, she may be gathered in and withdrawn based upon her actions. If you think that she could come back, or she could continue to say, oh, wow, I've got my niche. I am the queen bee in this world, and I've got all my little bees all fluttering around in my beehive, and we're all doing our thing, and we now speak for God, and we have found new research and new understanding, and we're going to pursue that while we demean that other guy that we know that Yahweh has issued hundreds of prophecies regarding. Do you think that Yahweh would let her back in? Or was she only given the opportunity to earn the right end, way back in, by doing exactly what Aaron did, saying, I was foolish. What I did was wrong. I will stop. And Yahweh made it very clear. She needs to shut up. She needs to pay a price for what she has done. She brought this upon herself. She must shut up, be isolated, and incarcerated. Even if her father had shown his contempt by spitting in her face, let no one question that she has brought this on herself and should be disgraced, humiliated, and shamed on an ongoing basis. Do not question that she deserves to be embarrassed and deprived, even disrespected. That's God's response. Why would God say such a thing? Do you think God's a meanie? Or is there a reason that he would come on this strong? What is the reason that in this circumstance I would respond exactly the same way? Because I know that when you stand down and you allow this kind of thing to happen, particularly at a time like now, when we're on the cusp of the Shabuah and Towrah harvest and the return of Yahweh, and you allow this kind of behavior where someone says, you're not the only one God has authorized to speak through. We speak for him too. And then you criticize his wife so that you can justify your diminishment in the meaning of him. You know how many souls are potentially lost as a result of that? Do you know how impoverished the Shabuah harvest could be if we just laid down and allowed it to happen? If all this message was filtered through them, what would the consequence be? And when you realize that being compassionate to someone who is doing something very wrong is showing no regard for those they have lured in and deceived, and for those who will never hear the message because of what they have done, you realize that by far and away the most loving and compassionate thing to do is to do everything in your power to shut them up and to isolate them and to let them know they should be shamed and discredited and dismissed. Even for those that are the hanging around, the two people that I spoke so adoringly of, that have contributed so much and deserve credit for all they have done through the years, they need to know Yahweh's response so that they can come free and clean. Now, as a result of what she has done, this is God's statement. For this is what Yahweh says: be observant and consider the means to exercise good judgment. Now, what I'm going to share with you now actually takes us past this event that uprising by an insider, by Moshe's sister and his brother. We're going to move past that now. The lesson has been prophetic. It has described exactly what has transpired. And now I want to share what Yahweh had to say about the role that we are collaborating on, so that you might have an appreciation for what is at stake. Now, this first part comes from the book of proper chodoring, How to Act as a Choder. It's the book that introduced the role I'm playing as the choder in the 11th chapter that speak of the 7 spirits of Yahweh coming upon me so that I can be emboldened and protected and inspired to communicate this message regarding introducing Yahweh's name, reacquainting Yisrael with Dod and all he has accomplished for his people. And in so doing, this proper book of chodering says, "For this is what Yahweh says, be observant and consider Shamar, the means to exercise good judgment and to justly resolve disputes." Mishpat from Mai and Shaphat, to decide correctly based upon considering the implications. Then engage, acting upon that which is correct and vindicating, because indeed my deliverance and resulting salvation are approaching. He's speaking of what we are doing now today. We are just 8.5 years from Yahweh's return. And the one who is correct about me, not many, the one who is correct about me, he will come and he will be revealed. Yashayah, Yahweh saves, Isaiah 56:1. Blessed by the benefits of the relationship, this person who acts and engages based upon this, because the son of Adam, the son of man, by observing the Shabbat and by not defiling and profaning it, understanding its purpose. By the way, this purpose of the Shabbat, it's a verb. It's actionable. Yahweh does his best work on the Shabbat. The Shabuah harvest, well, I guess all rabbinic Jews are going to miss it because they won't even stand up. It occurs on a Shabbat. The Towrah harvest, it occurs on a Shabbat. The sacrifice of the Adam of Perah, it occurs on a Shabbat. The beginning of the millennial Shabbat, when we camp out with Yahweh, begins on a, you guessed it, Shabbat. Shabbat isn't do nothing day. It's celebrate the relationship with Yahweh day. It's a day to celebrate all that Yahweh has promised in this plan of 7. And not defiling it and profane it. Don't make it common. Rabbinic Jews have made it common. They have profaned it. He is empowered, strengthened, enlightened, and restored by it. And by being observant, his hand is kept from acting upon or engaging in anything unjust, immoral, or irrational. Yashayah 56:2. Continuing to speak of the Goy, we find that this observant foreigner and authorized designee is directly associated with and collaborative with Yahweh. Yahweh says, "Do not say to the Nakar, this observant son of a foreign land," one who pays attention and is observant from Nakar, one who knows and understands through thoughtful examination, who recognizes and acknowledges, who is discerning and respectful, which is the path to understanding and comprehension, who has formed a relationship with Yahweh. Something which would infer or suggest Yahweh has abandoned me, preventing me from being included as part of his family. And let not an esteemed and authorized designee say, "What now, if I have become a silenced counselor and muted messenger?" What now? if my voice at this time is muted. 56:3. To the contrary, this is what Yahweh says on behalf of individuals who have been castrated as a result of the positions they have taken as leaders, of those who provide guidance regarding the benefits of the relationship by being consistently and continuously observant during my Shabbat. Being observant when? During my Shabbats. Who evaluate and choose to walk along the correct path in deference to me, and who are willing to demonstrate an intense desire to learn, to be steadfastly committed to, and to become empowered by my covenant. I will offer freely giving to them in my home and within my family and within my protected enclosure. An outstretched, welcoming, and empowering hand, and a name even better than other names of sons and daughters. I will give to him and to them an everlasting and eternal designation and reputation, which for the benefit of the relationship will never be removed. Yeshaya 56:5. Let it not be said that Yahweh has abandoned his people or prevented them from being part of his family. He has done no such thing. The Nakar and Saris knows better. Israelites are estranged from God because they have done this to themselves. The mission is to share the truth with all who will listen. Moreover, this Nakar, observant foreigner, and Saris, authorized designee, has not sought to replace Yehudim, but instead to welcome the beloved of Yah. He is committed to guiding his people home. Yahweh values the observant, especially when they take their lumps by standing up against the ways of man. He wants us to provide guidance, especially regarding the benefits of the covenant relationship. The insight which stands out, grabbing our attention, is the way Yahweh describes his designees' observance of the Shabbat. He is not inactive, doing nothing, as the religious profess, but instead he explores the word actively and shares what he has learned. As a result of this approach, the very thing we're doing right now at this moment, he is found leading others down the path which provides the benefit of the relationship. This is something the Nakar, observant foreigner, and Sarith, authorized designee, is eager to experience with Yahweh, as it is born out of his respect for God and his desire to please him. As always, I will demonstrate an intense desire to learn, to be enriched and empowered by his words, and he will respond to this steadfast devotion to his covenant and family by assuring that the harvests, which I've been asked to oversee, are productive. While it is apparent that the Nakar is seeking to please Yahweh and not pursuing accolades, God, as his father, is offering him a name better than any other. He will forever be known as the one who shared the benefits of the relationship, and having done so, others will benefit. God said through Yeshaya, the children of the Nakar, the observant and discerning foreigner, have formed a relationship with Yahweh. They serve him in love with Yahweh's name. If you are among the children of the Nakar, if you are the benefit of that which I have learned and shared with you about Yahweh, his covenant, the Mikra, his Torah, and his beloved son Daud, then you serve Yahweh in love and in name. Seeking to exist as his co-workers, they always observe the Shabbat, making it special by not disrespecting it. They willingly demonstrate an intense desire to learn about, to be steadfastly committed to, and become empowered by my covenant. when he's talking about celebrating the Shabbat, he didn't miss a beat. Observing the Shabbat is to willingly demonstrate an intense desire to learn about, to be steadfastly committed to be empowered by Yahweh's covenant. He said, "It is my desire to bring them to my set-apart mountain and cause them to rejoice, being elated in the family. Their uplifting sacrifice and elevating offering will be accepted and favored on my altar." Yeah, in this particular case, that rings true because Dode made the sacrifice as the Pesach, Passover lamb. He was a Zeroah, a sacrifice after all. And his herald, Yada, will make the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah, both on Mikre, one on Pesach, the other on Towrah. And those sacrifices will be accepted and favored. This is because my house shall be called a home of intervention for the entire family. Well, this is role reversal. Hasidic Jews look down on the ultra-Orthodox Jews, and they are racist in their degradation of Goyim. With all evidence to the contrary, they view themselves as superior, and yet those receiving preferential treatment from Yahweh are Goyim and secular Jews, as the proverbial sons and daughters of the Nakar, observant foreigner. They would all have been decidedly anti-religious. However, the Goyim being adopted by Yahweh are not accepted because they are Goyim, but instead because they are explicitly identifying with the meaning of Yisrael. They understand what it means to be individuals who engage and endure with God. And these Yehudim are not being rejected or replaced because they are Yehudim, but instead because they have chosen to act like Goyim. Therefore, the covenant relationship is correct, while Judaism is wrong. It would be impossible to overemphasize what Yahweh has inspired Yashayah to convey on our behalf. There are transformative words throughout all of this narrative, serving as life-changing revelations. Perhaps the most pondered question throughout time has been, if there is a God, how do I approach him? And here we find the answer. These prophetic writings demonstrate that Yahweh is God and that he has provided a list of things that is shared by those who are invited into his home. Members of our Heavenly Father's family. 1, we form a relationship with Yahweh. We choose to associate with God in a manner that is consistent with the covenant's terms and conditions. Man was created for this purpose. Therefore, we are rewarded for choosing to know, love, trust, and rely upon our Creator's and Savior's instructions. 2, we serve God. We work with him. Those of us who have accepted the invitation to live in Yahweh's home render assistance, fulfilling our roles in our Heavenly Father's family. Our contribution enables the family to grow. 3, we love Yahweh's personal name. More than just knowing it, we adore and treasure it. And it was through our collaboration that Yahweh's name was reintroduced to the world. We wear it proudly in recognition that Yahweh is our Father. And we proclaim Yahweh's name boldly, recognizing that it alone has the power to save, especially when it is associated with his beloved Son. 4, we are and always will be devoted to learning. By closely examining and carefully considering the Torah, we are motivated to share Yahweh's guidance. This inspires us to expose and condemn religious lies as witnesses to the truth of the Torah. And to do so, especially on Towrah, we find that God's intent is to reconcile his relationship with his people. 5, we actively observe the Shabbat. We use this day to increase our understanding of God's plan, just as we're doing now, as well as his prophetic timeline, while seeking to enhance our relationship with our Father. 6, we are passionate about the covenant. And as such, we walk with God and respond to him in accordance with the 5 conditions which comprise and define that agreement. By responding to and accepting the covenant's instructive conditions, we are afforded abundant and eternal life within Yahweh's family. And 7, we respond to Yahweh's requests, and we appreciate his intercession on our behalf as beneficiaries of Pesach, Passover, matzah and yeasted bread, and Bikurim, firstborn children, and soon 7 Shabbat, and then Towrah, and Yahweh's return with his son on Kippurim, so that we can camp out together and the earth return to the conditions of Eden on Sukkah. Thrilled to blow the shofar on Shabuah and also Towrah. As a result, Yahweh is pleased to bring us to his mountain and home so that we can celebrate his return with his son on Yom Kippurim. Continuing to teach, God says, Yahweh, my upright one and foundation, who gathers the scattered of Yisrael, yet again announces in advance of it occurring, I will assemble, bringing together before him those he has obtained. 56:8. It appears as Yashayah is acknowledging 2 related events. The beloved prophet is reminding us that Yahweh will once again kabatz, collect, unify, assemble, and save the Nadak, the scattered sheep of Yisrael. This process began on January 27th, 1945, with the liberation of Auschwitz, the concentration camp, leading directly to the return of Yehudim to Yisrael. It will conclude 88 years, 248 days thereafter, 777 hours on 1,000 hours, I should say, on October 2nd, 2033, in year 6000 Yah, on the day of reconciliations. The second aspect of this appears to be deeply personal, letting us see an aspect of Yahweh's character seldom considered. God has arranged a glorious reception on behalf of the Goy who has been frantically blowing the shofar, the Nakar, observant foreigner, and the Sharis, authorized designee. Yahweh wants the man he has deployed to call his people home, to witness the product of his efforts, a united Yisrael gathered before Yahweh on Yom Kippurim. It is an acknowledgement of a job well done and greatly appreciated. We know the end of our mission together. We will succeed. And while Yada views his contributions as, negligible compared to Moshe and Dod particularly, God realizes that a joy shared is a joy magnified. The Nakar will get, albeit in a much more dramatic fashion than he anticipated or probably would feel comfortable with, what he has at least long desired, the opportunity to experience Yahweh's joy in the presence of his people. Want to sit to the back of the room, and Yahweh embraces so many of you who will have capitalized on what you have learned as a result of our collaboration. So while he has requested nothing more than being allowed to stand in that room when Yahweh greets a family member for the first time, it seems that God wants a bit more, but that's God's nature. He is our Father, after all. It is what fathers do when their children please them by accomplishing something worthwhile. He, as a proud father, wants to see his son's response to all that he has achieved with them working together. Turns out they want the same thing and for the same reason, particularly as it relates to Yahweh and Dod. On behalf of Yisrael, I have shared the prophetic pronouncement regarding the Nakri throughout these many years. In the Hebrew text, the only difference between Nakar and Nakri is the addition of the Yod, or the hand of Yahweh, making Nakri my observant foreigner. In the pictographic characters which originally shaped these words, Nakar means the seeds which take root and grow are being handed to the observant to see and consider. And while that's good, presented as Nakri, it is far better. Hebrew words are determined to be beneficial or counterproductive based upon whether the characters which comprise them move toward or away from one of the 4 letters comprising Yahweh's name. This is something that my good friend and our co-host of this program, Kirk, discovered and shared with us. And in this case, in the case of the Nakri, the child of the covenant bearing the seed and the observant individual are drawn looking towards Yahweh's outstretched hand. With an eye to these characteristics, the Nesh banner, the Choder secondary branch, has been asked to write at Yahweh's behest, is scribed in such a way that it speaks of a son sowing the seeds which grow and bear fruit on a sign which is being lifted up for all to read. With this in mind, then here is Solomon's commencement address to the children of Israel upon the completion of Yahweh's home on Mount Moriah, the very place the Nachri will offer his life to spare the remnant of the children of Israel on Towrah in year 6,000 Yah. And since this prophetic pronouncement was delivered in 968 BCE, standing in the very place the Nachri will stand as the Adam of Parah, these words have echoed above the Temple Mount for exactly 3,000 years before their fulfillment on Towrah, September 24th at sunrise, year 6,000 Yah in 2033. After addressing the exemplary lives and lyrics of his father Dod, Solomon, his son, proclaimed, "Therefore, regarding someone else, this Nachri, observant and discerning foreigner, from a different ethnicity and geographic location, who will come to understand, who, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, is not of your people, this Yisrael. He will come from a distant country at a distant time for the express purpose of being a reliable witness and proclaiming and providing truthful answers regarding your exceedingly important name. Your hand and influence are felt with this Shazak, influential and passionate man who is prepared to lead as the Zeroah, the one sowing the seeds and cultivating his harvest on his behalf as his protective shepherd and on behalf of his sacrificial lamb, whom you have reached out and extended. When he arrives on the scene and he chooses to pursue this, then he will help interested parties reconcile the relationship by providing those who exercise good judgment with the information and justifications needed to make a correct and reasoned decision regarding this familiar relationship. Davadim ha-yomim, words of the day, 2 Chronicles 6:32. But that's not the end of what he had to say. Please listen. This is important. Your soul may depend on how you respond to what you're going to hear next. When you hear this come out of the heavens, coming from the atmosphere as if coming from a cloud, within the location where you live, then engage and act accordingly, doing everything which to show the way the Nachri, observant foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location who understands, has invited you to read. Doing everything he has invited you to read for the express purpose of being a witness who provides answers such that every person on earth will have a genuine and ongoing opportunity to become familiar with Yada, to know, acknowledge, and accept, as well as understand your name, coming to respect and revere you along with your people, Yisrael. And also, so that you may know, Yada, that's truthfully your family and this house, which to reveal the correct path to walk, to give life meaning that I have built for the family, are designated and called by your name. Debatim ha-yomim, words of the day, 2 Chronicles 6:33. This is Yahweh's prophetic witness to what he has asked me to achieve on his behalf, on behalf of his beloved Son, our Messiah, the Son of God, our Savior, who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bekurim, Dod, to call his people home, to reacquaint them, to make reconciliations possible. And I am telling you now that this, my friends, is one of the most important messages ever delivered. And it was delivered the moment the house built for Yahweh's name was open and completed for the first time. I am Yada, the final Zeroah, the Nakri, speaking to you tonight as the host of the Yahweh blog. May you have a wonderful Shabbat. Good night.